You know, when you think about rock music, the word architecture probably isn't the first thing that pops into your head. But for the band Television, honestly, it's the perfect way to describe them. Because they didn't just write songs, they literally built a whole new blueprint for what rock and roll could sound like.
Yeah, this quote right here, it really nails what they were all about. See, at a time when everyone was into those big, bluesy guitar solos, Television came along and said, nah, we're going to do something else. Something more precise, more intricate, and totally, completely new. They were building from the ground up.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? How on earth did this band from New York, a band you never heard on the radio, end up becoming one of the most influential acts of all time? Well, let's dive in and take a look at the plans they drew up.
Okay, so our story really kicks off back in the early 70s. The band was just starting to piece together this sound, a sound that nobody even had a name for yet. It had the raw energy of punk, for sure, but it also had these high art ambitions.
This right here, this is the absolute heart of Television's sound. So I want you to just forget everything you know about lead guitar and rhythm guitar. That's not how they worked. Instead, Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd created this system where their guitars would just weave in and out of each other, like two gears clicking perfectly into place. It created these amazing chiming textures. It was a completely different way to think about how guitars could work together in a band.
So how did it all come together? Well, it starts with Tom Verlaine and Richard Hell meeting as kids. Then they start this early band, the Neon Boys. But the real game changer is when Richard Lloyd joins, because he's the other gear they needed for that interlocking sound. And then there's CBGBs. They didn't just play there, they literally helped build the stage. And in doing that, they basically built the foundation for the entire New York punk scene.
But, you know, just like any big construction project, things weren't always smooth. There was a lot of friction inside the band. The two main architects, well, they had very, very different ideas about what they were trying to build.
And this is so crucial to understanding the band. On one side, you've got Tom Verlaine. He's the perfectionist, the composer, obsessed with complex music and poetic, artsy lyrics. And on the other side, you've got Richard Hell. He's pure punk rock chaos, all ripped clothes, frantic energy, and that raw street attitude. It was a total clash of visions, high art versus raw grit.
And, well, something had to give. When Richard Hell left in '75, taking his legendary punk anthem Blank Generation with him, it changed everything. They brought in Fred Smith from Blondie, and wow, the change was seismic. Smith's bass playing was solid, melodic. He was the stable foundation that Verlaine and Lloyd needed to finally let those complex, interlocking guitars truly soar.
So, with the lineup finally locked in, Television was ready. They were ready to build their masterpiece. And this wasn't just going to be another album. No, this was a major statement, a landmark in the architecture of rock music.
This quote tells you everything you need to know about Tom Verlaine. I mean, think about it. The legendary Brian Eno is producing their demos, and Verlaine rejects them. Why? Because he thought they sounded like a 60s surf rock band. He had this very specific sound in his head, something with special menace and majesty, and he was not going to compromise on that vision for anyone, not even Brian Eno.
And that singular vision is what led to this. 10 minutes and 40 seconds. That is how long the title track, Marquee Moon, is. It's this epic, sprawling journey. It just completely blows the whole 3-minute pop song formula out of the water. Honestly, it's more like a classical composition than a typical rock song.
But here's the wild part. For all that creative genius, the album's story is a total paradox. Over in the UK, people got it right away. Critics loved it, it was a hit, shot up to number 28 on the charts. But back home, in the US, crickets. It didn't even make the charts. It was this absolute masterpiece that the mainstream just completely missed. They just weren't ready for it yet.
But hey, failing commercially doesn't mean you failed to have an impact. Not at all. In fact, those architectural plans that Television drew up, turns out they'd be studied, copied, and revered by countless bands for decades to come.
The real legacy is that sound. It's sharp, it's smart, it's totally unpredictable. It wasn't just some weird one-off thing. It became a foundational element, yeah, the literal blueprint for what we now know as indie and alternative rock.
And just look at this list, seriously. You've got REM covering their songs, you've got U2's The Edge basically lifting Verlaine's guitar style, Sonic Youth, The Strokes, even David Bowie. I mean, these aren't small bands. These are some of the most important artists of the last 40 years, and they all trace their sound back to what Television was building in that tiny club in New York.
But the story doesn't quite end there. Like one of those legendary buildings that was designed but never actually got built, Television has one last fascinating mystery attached to it.
So get this.
In 2007, the band gets back together, goes into the studio, and records an entire new album, 16 tracks. But it was never released. It's just vanished. So the question is, what happened?
And the answer, well, it brings us right back to the beginning, right back to the chief architect himself, Tom Verlaine's famous perfectionism. The exact same quality that made Marquee Moon a masterpiece is what kept their final album from ever being finished. So the tracks are out there, they exist, but without his final say-so, they just sit there, a silent monument to what could have been, a final, unheard chapter in their incredible architecture of sound.